Unknown to Sola, the palm wine was drugged. As the effects of the drug took hold, she began to feel dizzy and disoriented. On Kisses and Hugs Club today for singles and couples. Episode 84. Betrayed and Unbroken. Sola's fight for dignity. Sola, a devout member of her village community, met George, a street-savvy man, at a bustling market festival. George, with his charming ways, pursued Sola persistently. He often suggested they prove their love through physical intimacy, claiming it was customary in the village. Sola, steadfast in her beliefs and commitment to her faith, consistently refused. She held firm to her values, despite George's repeated attempts to convince her otherwise. The village, while vibrant and close-knit, had its share of issues. Families were under stress due to economic hardships and social pressures. In her search for peace, Sola found herself spending more time with George, seeking solace from the turmoil at home. Her parents' constant fighting created an unbearable atmosphere, making her desperate for peace and understanding. George, with his charm and attentive ear, seemed to offer the comfort she was missing. He listened to her complaints about her parents, sympathized with her, and provided a shoulder to lean on. This made Sola feel closer to him, mistaking his manipulative attentions for genuine care. Sola's home life had become a battleground. Her father, a hard-working farmer, struggled to make ends meet due to poor harvests. The financial strain put immense pressure on the family. Her mother, who sold handmade crafts in the market, was equally stressed, trying to contribute to the family's income. The constant financial struggles often led to heated arguments between her parents, creating an environment of tension and conflict. The relentless bickering made home unbearable for Sola, driving her to seek solace elsewhere. George's early years were marked by constant struggle and hardship. His father left when he was just a toddler, forcing his mother to shoulder the burden of raising 4 children alone. The family lived in a dilapidated hut on the outskirts of the village, where basic necessities were often a luxury. George's mother, a hard-working woman, sold vegetables in the market, but her earnings were meager. Many nights, George and his siblings went to bed hungry. Growing up without a father figure, George was forced to grow up quickly. He took on odd jobs around the village to help his mother, learning to navigate the streets and fend for himself. The absence of a stable family structure left George vulnerable to negative influences. By the time he was a teenager, he had fallen in with a group of young men who, like him, came from troubled backgrounds. They found solace in each other's company, forming a tight-knit group bound by their shared struggles. Despite their camaraderie, there was a constant undercurrent of competitiveness within the group. They often engaged in risky behavior, each trying to outdo the others to gain respect and validation. This dynamic created an environment where proving one's manliness became a measure of worth. George, with his charm and street smarts, was usually at the forefront of these challenges. However, when it came to Sola, he found himself struggling to meet the expectations of his friends. George's friends constantly pressured him to go intimate with Sola, taunting him for his inability to do so. They mocked his efforts to woo her without success, questioning his masculinity. The pressure weighed heavily on George, who felt he needed to prove himself to maintain his standing within the group. The more Sola resisted, the more determined he became to achieve his goal, not just for his own satisfaction, but to silence his critics. Sola's consistent refusals only fueled George's frustration. He saw her as a challenge, a prize he needed to claim to prove his worth. The more she resisted, the more his friends teased him, and the cycle of pressure and frustration intensified. George's need for validation from his peers clouded his judgment, leading him down a path of manipulation and deceit. One fateful day, after yet another intense argument at home, Sola decided to visit George. She hoped his company would provide a respite from the turmoil at home. George greeted her warmly and, noticing her troubled demeanor, offered her freshly tapped palm wine. Sola hesitated but then took a sip, trusting George's intentions despite her inner doubts. Unknown to Sola, the palm wine was drugged. As the effects of the drug took hold, she began to feel dizzy and disoriented. George coaxed her to rest, saying she looked tired and needed to relax. As her consciousness faded, Sola was vaguely aware of being moved to another part of the hut. Hours later, she awoke in a haze. The room was dark, lit only by the flickering light of an oil lamp. The air was thick with the smell of herbs and alcohol, mixed with a pungent odor she couldn't identify. Her head throbbed, and her body felt heavy. Panic set in as she saw George and 3 other men standing around her, their eyes red and filled with a malevolent glint. Though weak from the drug's effects, Sola mustered all the strength she could to fight back against the boys. Her mother, a fighter in her youth, had trained all her children in self-defense. She remembered the stances, the swift movements, and the powerful strikes her mother had taught her. Sola tried to recall the techniques as best as she could, but her limbs felt heavy and uncoordinated. Her vision blurred, and her head spun, making it difficult to focus. Despite her condition, Sola swung her arms and kicked her legs, attempting to fend off her attackers. She aimed for their vulnerable spots, hoping to inflict enough pain to escape. However, her strikes were weak and unsteady, lacking the force needed to repel the men. Sola hadn't finished her training. Feeling invincible and believing she was too good to be harmed, she had often skipped practice, thinking it was unnecessary. Now, she regretted every missed session, every opportunity to strengthen her skills. The realization hit her hard as she struggled to defend herself. If only she had been more diligent, more disciplined, maybe she could have stood a chance against them. The men, seeing her feeble attempts to resist, closed in on her with grim determination. They were stronger, more numerous, and unrelenting. Sola's efforts, though valiant, were futile against their combined strength. She was outnumbered and overpowered, each of her movements countered and restrained. Her heart raced with fear and desperation as she realized, with horror, their intention to assault her. The men moved closer, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. She could hear the loud drumming and singing from the village festival outside, a stark contrast to the terror unfolding within the hut. The music and celebration, once a source of joy, now seemed cruelly indifferent to her plight. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to scream for help, but her voice was weak, barely a whisper against the cacophony outside. The vibrant sounds of drumming and singing from the celebration drowned out any cries for help, leaving Sola isolated in her ordeal. Sola's ordeal was harrowing. She managed to escape the hut later that night, bruised and traumatized. She stumbled her way back to her home, her mind a whirl of fear, shame, and anger. Her parents, noticing her disheveled state, were immediately concerned. Despite their own issues, they embraced her, providing the comfort she desperately needed. Sola's story spread quickly through the village. The elders convened a council to address the issue. George and his accomplices were summoned and faced severe punishment for their actions. The incident sparked a broader discussion about trust, relationships, and the influences of external pressures on the village's youth. Amid this turmoil, it was revealed that Sola had recently won a dancing competition in her village. She had been chosen to represent her village in the general inter-village competition, which was to be held in 2 months' time. This achievement highlighted her resilience and the potential she had to rise above her challenges. Lessons learned. Sola's experience serves as a poignant reminder of the consequences of misplaced trust and the importance of upholding personal values despite external pressures. Here are the key takeaways from her story. 1. Be cautious with whom you trust. Sola's trust in George, despite her initial reservations, led to a traumatic experience. It's crucial to be discerning about whom you allow into your life, especially when they don't share your values or intentions. 2. Avoid putting yourself in vulnerable situations. Visiting George in his territory gave him the upper hand. It's important to meet people in safe, neutral locations, especially if you have any doubts about their character. 3. Seek support in healthy ways. Sola turned to George for solace because her home environment was stressful. Finding healthy outlets for support, such as friends, mentors, or community leaders, can provide the comfort and guidance needed without compromising safety. 4. Listen to your instincts. Sola had doubts about George's intentions but ignored them. Trusting your instincts can often prevent dangerous situations. 5. Value alignment in relationships. Building relationships with individuals who share your values and beliefs can create a stronger, more supportive network. Sola's values clashed with George's, leading to conflict and ultimately harm.
Do you want more? Read the full blog by clicking on the link in bio or description to navigate to the devotionals, or go to www.kissesandhugs.org. Watch full video on youtube.com/Pastor Dunamis. For one-on-one therapy, counseling, or an intervention in your marriage or relationship, go to bit.ly/therapy needed. To get courses for singles and couples, go to bit.ly/course. To partner with us, go to www.kissesandhugs.org/give.